Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series Tragedy and Comic Absurdity in Novel. So, we are talking about tragedy and comic absurdity in novel in the context of Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary. So, we will open today's discussion with Flaubert's comment. He had once remarked with some amount of wrath, and I quote, "It's strange how the most banal utterances of the bourgeoisie sometimes make me marvel. There are gestures, sounds of people's voices that I can't just get over. Silly remarks that almost give me vertigo. The bourgeoisie is for me something unfathomable." So he is profoundly critical of the class realities to which he belongs. He does not subscribe to the values of the bourgeoisie. And like I have already mentioned in my previous lecture, Emma's immediate, class, the class in which she's born in a peasant family, she's married to a mediocre man, a medical representative, Charles Bovary, and from there start her extramarital affairs, her romantic expeditions, her experimentations with, romance and love, and she's seeking for something that she has not been able to find, an imaginary and ideal form of love that she has not been able to discover in her relationship with Charles Bovary. In his writings, Flaubert expressed his contempt for this decent civilization that took satisfaction in having created the guillotine, cream tarts, poison, railroads, and royalty. So the complacence, the pomposity, and yet the term I used in my previous lecture, the Philistine attitude, a materialistic attitude, an unimaginative, mediocre attitude of the bourgeoisie is something that Flaubert loathed greatly. So, in his letter to his girlfriend, Louise Collet, written in 1846, Flaubert further vents his disdain for the bourgeoisie. I quote, "What stops me from taking myself seriously, even though I am essentially a serious person, is that I find myself extremely ridiculous. Not the kind of small-scale ridiculousness of slapstick comedy, but rather a ridiculousness that seems intrinsic to human life and manifests itself in the simplest actions and the most ordinary gestures. For example, I can never shave without starting to laugh. It seems so idiotic. All this is very difficult to explain," unquote. So, we see that Flaubert is certainly moving out of or making a departure from the romantic movement, the romantic tradition, the complacence that sat at the heart of bourgeoisie culture. Furthermore, Flaubert also has a strain of formalism in his voice that understands literature as a pure autonomous entity, whose changes, whose whose essence is not affected by any other category. So we are going to talk about the art for art's sake that greatly influences Flaubert's writing. Art not as a message, art not as a revolution, but art for art's sake, right? So Madame Bovary happens without any external support, but with an internal force. The propellant of the novel, the moving force of the novel does not come from some historical brace, some historical events that brace the narrative. We do not know what is happening at the time when Emma exists. At what historical juncture Emma's narrative is taking place. We don't know the larger historical, forces and how Emma's life speaks to these larger historical chapters. So it is. It hardly has a historical dimension. It does not have any historical dimension or any, the externality is hardly there. It's very much a journey on the inner. It's a journey on the inner, moving from Don Quixote, right, where the landscape, the horizon was expansive, where a man trotting on horseback was free. He was not, limited mentally or physically by, ideas of nation, of separate countries. He was just riding on a horse as a free man, and he could become what he wanted to become. That was Don Quixote. From there on, we see that Emma's landscape is still a vast, span, but humans that have become more psychically complex by the time Flaubert is writing are bored by this external, geographical reality, whatever it is. They are somehow not cognizant of the happenings outside. So the journey, when we talk of journey, it's the complexity on the inner, a journey on the inner. So, like the formalists, Flaubert is interested in devising a method for his writing. Literary work is seen as comprising different devices and different functioning parts, and there is a systematic treatment of literary work rather than a very emotive content. We see that a very systematic treatment is being meted out to the form of the novel Madame Bovary. The writing happens, chunk by chunk. So the writing, it's in a way, it's a non-story which doesn't move in any direction. Each chunk is about each, episode, each venture in Emma's life, which end up inevitably in a spiral fashion. So she's back to square one. She has an affair. She's dissatisfied. She is back to her mean position. Again, she tries to venture in another direction in search of love. So these different chunks refer to the different episodes in Madame Bovary's life, which do not lead to anywhere. So as Emma outgrows the frame of the bourgeois society's ideal, her placement in terms of a husband, a family and domesticity belies her complex sense of being. Her desired totality is a constructed ideal and inhabits a psychic space. So she wants to become, like we have already understood, the romantic heroine that she reads in a novel, that she reads in a book of romance. So she cannot become, in other words, she cannot become a coveted character that belongs to the dominant tradition which informs Flaubert's contemporary society, the romantic tradition. She cannot become a coveted heroine from that tradition. She reads about them, she's influenced about them, but it all becomes absurd. So Flaubert, in a way, is commenting on the limitations of the romantic imagination. They cannot be necessarily transcribed to real life. She does not fit well to her immediate physical setting. As a result, the ideology of journey does not hold. Her journey does not reach, or her journeys do not lead to any sharp telos, do not meet any sharp telos. Towards the end of the novel, She's exhausted from her endless romantic overtures, search for romance, the ideal romance, and uh, all the incestuous indulgences that she gets into. And so Emma returns home to Charles, where she is physically in the same domesticity, the same familial space, and yet the reader who has accompanied her uh, in all her secret overtures, in all her experiments with life, the reader knows about the irreconcilable distance that has been created between uh, Emma's physical identity and spiritual identity. So, although she started from her home and she came back after all the failures to the home, uh, the gap is enormous. The gap between Charles and Emma can never be filled. But Charles has no idea. He's another character in the novel, but the reader knows it all, right? Such fragmentation and, decoupling, divorce within oneself, such, fissure within oneself cannot be cannot be overcome, in a sense, cannot be resolved. And so the only path left for Emma is to kill herself. So the only resolution, in a way, the only solution to her, um, to her frustration, to the fiasco that her life has become, is through uh, suicide. So her suicide seems abrupt to Charles, who is a very inert figure, as juxtaposed with the passionate, romance that Madame Bovary is seeking in her life. And yet, the suicide has a causal meaning for the reader who has been who has undertaken the journey with Emma, who knows about the different experiences Emma had in the meantime in her life. And so the reader that has traversed the entire course of her failed life with her knows that she is left only with the option of suiciding. To the reader that the author takes along with each of Madame Bovary's adventures, or rather misadventures, death is an inevitable, gradual, and a very complex psychological reaction. Now, Charles Bovary is symptomatic of this lack of impulse. He is a medical representative, really mediocre. He has overt faith and, and dedication for his wife. He is not complex. He is a very straightforward character. He is almost anonymous in juxtaposition with Emma. He's always almost not there when juxtaposed with Emma's flamboyance. And he represents an absence of imagination, profoundly so. Yet, the critics would also note that the novel begins and ends not with, the namesake of the novel, Madame Bovary. The novel does not begin and end with Emma, but with Charles, her husband. So his presence is an imperative, and it enables fulfilling Emma's tragic end. Emma becomes Emma, and a desiring and unfulfilled, woman, unhappy woman, precisely because she's married to someone like Charles, right? His prosaic character pushes Emma to consider their marriage as a sham, as a farce, and seek some romantic bliss elsewhere. So, as the world and the protagonist of the novel are degraded and corrupt, we cannot find an ideal world in the form of the novel. The novel, as a genre, is all about experimentations, a genre which is, deserted by gods, like Milan Kundera would say. And so we see that Emma's ventures never meet any fruitful goals. The ventures remain insatiate and search for a sense of totality, the bookish totality, the totality inspired by romance written in books is completely futile. So, Madame Bovary's endless search for an ideal world as seen through the lens of romance characters from books lead to a series of fiasco, and there is no harmony at any level. We will talk more about this in our ensuing lectures. Um Cacophony defines, all. Cacophony is the uh, is the common theme through the series of events that readers uh, uh, experience in the novel, um, and which make up the plot of the novel. Nothing. There is no formation. There is just dissipation of anything uh, that is trying to take a positive shape. Uh, so, Madame Bovary's journey towards futility could have continued interminably, endlessly, um, in the direction of an infinite nadir. So, she is hitting a new low every time. She is led to an abysmal low, to an infinite chasm. But an imposed limit is drawn by the novelistic trait of the text in order to give the work a consolidated form, right? So, just because a novel has to begin and it also needs to end. Um, Emma's journey can never realize a completion or become an organic whole, such that there is a violent rupture between the self and the world. Think of our lectures on epic, where an organic whole is present, where the narrative is previously known to the rest of the society. And so, the self is always the epic self, the epic hero is a community figure working for the community, representing the community values. But here in the novel, the I is an individual, a thinking self, and this dialogue, this conflict between the self and the world, where the two cannot be reconciled, acts as the torque which leads the narrative forward. So, Madame Bovary exploits her innate qualities to equate her status with the aristocratic ladies, who purely belong to her fictitious reading space. So, Jörg Lukács speaks about a dialogic sequence in narrative order where an initial disruption offers a torque to the plot. So, we see that a problem, like Kundera also says, a problem is important. A problem at the heart of the narrative enables the narrative to, develop a series of events in time. How? So that's how, when we have a central problem, set around the problem, we have a series of events, and the novelist plays with the events and time, how the events are embedded, how they are stringed in time. They could move in a linear direction, there could be flashback, but still the events are stringed in time. So, there is a temporal dimension. That's how novel happens. However, in this case, we see that Madame Bovary never promises, the novel never promises any kind of reconciliation. How this dialogue between self and the world, the central problem, the disruption, and how it is countered, how it is approached, constitutes the bulk of the plot of any novel. However, in the case of Madame Bovary, there is no final reciprocation to Emma's pursuits. Emma's pursuits remain kind of unanswered, unfulfilled, and so there is no moment of restoration in the novel. It is markedly different from the epic journey, for example, which is characterized by an organic, closure, an organic wholeness, where the entire uh, plot is known in prior by the reader or the audience. So the non-success of Emma's pursuits lead to non-journey or unsuccessful journey, which further adds a sense of continuity and a sense of becoming to the narrative, right? So the force, if we may, if there is any such force that propels the narrative forward, it is Emma's unfulfillment, her frustration, her unmaking, the unmaking of Emma, her desire to become something and then her unbecoming, so that there is no finality. Her, her hitting a new low, becoming more and more decadent, more and more profligate, and dissipate with her own life, wasteful with her own life, could have continued, but an order was imposed as a text, and so we see that the order of the text, the way the text draws a finishing line, is a very tentative one. She has to be killed in the end. Had she remained alive? Because there is no moral suggestion that Emma, for example, is contrite. She's repenting for betraying her husband. She does not become the penitent, the grieving wife who seeks, her husband to pardon her. Nothing of the sort. She is entirely confused when she comes back, and then she doesn't know what to make of her life, and so she kills herself, right? It's a failed existence, an existence sans any meaning. So Emma does not reflect loyalty to an expression of totality or a pre-given idea before it is constituted. She is becoming at every point, and yet is she becoming something else? Is herself moving from one point to the other? Is there a transformation? We don't see any. Her journey is individual, ridden with anxiety and dilemma, and it is unaccomplished and evokes self-consciousness, which lends immanence to the meaning of life. She is anything but an essence. She is all about experiencing through explorations, right? So Flaubert's novel Madame Bovary qualifies through its aesthetic values, as it is basically about provincial life, a very humdrum provincial life, and in such a non-story, the major focus is on the inner journey. The characters are basically bored with their surroundings. A predominant theme in the novel is ennui or boredom, as well as a feeling of a feeling of being super saturated, and so completely nonchalant, indifferent towards whatever is happening on the outer. So the plot moves through showing the complexities, the complex emotions that make and unmake the self, right? It focuses on the internal forces only. So reality is shown as ugly, the beauty and the grotesque merge after a point. And we are going to discuss further on this in our subsequent lectures on Madame Bovary, where how the beauty and the grotesque are not opposed, and the plot progresses in a staggering fashion, as nothing holds for too long. And this comprises precisely Flaubert's labor for writing, how he is making the plot work through its non-story, which does not rely on any historical chronos and topos, any real incident does not brace the narrative. It is entirely the psychic journey of Emma, once again, which does not transform the character. Uh, she becomes an adulteress. From a young wife, she becomes an adulteress. But then it's basically a narrative about floundering, about struggling and experimenting with her identity. So we see that Flaubert is majorly imperiling his position as a novelist through effacing the specificity of chronos and topos in the novel. The dimension of time and space are effaced, such that the narrative moves forward in time only through using stylistic markers. The writing contains an internal coherence of time. We do not find any dates, and so time is available as in terms of spirit and seasons, whereas a description of space and a bland nature allegorically refer to Emma's mind. So the nature, the bland nature and Emma's nature almost blend into each other, right? They merge, they reflect each other, they become the mirror of one another. Now, Flaubert, like I have already said, was deeply influenced by the art for art movement, the Romantic movement, as well as the beginnings of the realist movement, although it would be not wrong to say that he greatly rejected the sentimentality informing the Romantic tradition. So, Madame Bovary stands at the intersections of different revolutions and counter-revolutions. The only date that we find in the novel is 1812, the date when male protagonist Charles Bovary's father was implicated, and it refers to the monarchy being still in force in France. Other than for this, time is not calendrical throughout the narrative. We find time appearing only in terms of spirits and moments, as well as the time becomes the time is through the season, and the season also becomes a reflection of Emma's emotion, a mirror of Emma's psyche, right? So the season is on the outer as well as on the inner, right? The season defining the human nature of Emma. So when we talk of failure of language, let's take the character of protagonist Charles Bovary, with whom the novel opens, and name itself, the surname of the protagonist suggests bovine. Bovary is associated with bovine, cow-like, and so he is characterized by placidity, timidity. Charles's struggle with the education system and language is symptomatic of the struggle of the I, the individual I, with the collective, and its inability to fit into the collective and cocooning back within itself. At the heart of this symphony of a collective institution such as a classroom, we see how awkward Charles is in the opening scene, in the opening chapter. And at the heart of this collective harmony and discipline in an institution such as a classroom, there is a bestial ugliness. Language, the way students respond to the teacher in a collective voice, and they are almost responding to rhetorical questions in a premeditated manner, in a pre-programmed manner. The way a classroom functions is shown as very ugly. Voices rising like a crescendo and receding like a wave. And amid this kind of harmonious arrangement, Charles's syllables are jumbled and inarticulate, and when he's trying to pronounce his own name, he completely messes it up. He cannot pronounce his own name when the teacher asks. So that is that's where we find the first sign of awkwardness, the awkward character that henceforth Charles is going to become, even as a grown-up man, a married man. So his utterance is like a staccato, completely break off from the smooth communication that classroom facilitates and demands, right? So his failure of language is represented in such a staccato. Charles's failed articulation points to a crowd of other young students, young boys that snub her, almost bully her, and the collective language as, cramping further his spontaneity and freedom. He is completely, cramped by the group of boys around him who laugh at his awkwardness, his, bumpkin-like image, his image as a bumpkin. So this could be an effort to break away from the overbearing function of the meta language, where communication, almost individual communication at least, breaks down. So we see how language has been used by Flaubert in the novel, where meta language becomes dominant individual language that is coming from a boy like Charles Bovary, who hails from a very ordinary background, who appears as a bumpkin. His language doesn't matter, and his language thereby fails, right? I would like to read a portion. I would like to read a portion from the book, an excerpt from the book. Still standing well back in the corner behind the door, so that he was almost invisible, the new boy was a country lad of about 15 who towered over the rest of us. He wore his hair in a straight fringe across his brow like a village choir boy, and he looked sensible and very ill at ease. Although his shoulders were not particularly broad, his green cloth jacket with black buttons seemed tight round the armholes and revealed through the slits of his cuffs sun-reddened wrists, unaccustomed to being covered. His legs, clad in blue stockings, stuck out below a pair of yellowish trousers that were hitched up very high by his braces. His shoes were heavy, badly shined, and studded with nails. He began reciting our lessons. He listened attentively, concentrating as though listening to a sermon, not daring even to cross his legs or lean on his elbow. And at 2 o'clock, when the bell rang, the master had to tell him to line up with us all. We were in the habit, on entering our classroom, of flinging our caps onto the floor so as to leave our hands free. It was the thing to do. But either because he had not noticed this maneuver or because he did not dare try it, prayers were over and the new boy was still holding his cap on his knees. It was one of those head coverings of composite order in which one recognizes features of a military busby, a lancer's cap, a bowler hat, an otter skin cap, and a cotton nightcap. One of those pathetic objects, in fact, whose mute ugliness reveals great depths, like the face of a half-wit. Next, there was a kind of bag, its top a stiffened polygon covered in intricately fogged braid, from which hung at the end of a long skinny cord a little knot of gold threads in place of a tassel. It was new. The peak shone. "Stand up," said the master. He stood up. His cap fell down. The whole class began to laugh. He bent over to pick it up. The boy beside him knocked it down again with his elbow. He picked it up again. "I suggest you disencumber yourself of your helmet," said the master, a man of wit. A roar of laughter came from the class and disconcerted the poor lad, who could not decide whether he should keep his cap in his hand, put it on the floor, or place it on his head. He sat down again and put it on his lap. "Stand up," repeated the master, "and tell me your name." The new boy mumbled something completely unintelligible. "Again?" The same mumbled syllables emerged, drowned by the jeering of the class. Louder! Cried the master. Louder! With desperate resolve, the new boy opened his mouth stupendously wide and bellowed at the top of his lungs, as if shouting for someone the word Charles Bovary. The ensuing hullabaloo began instantaneously and grew louder and louder, punctuated by shrill shrieks. They howled, they bayed, they stamped, repeating Charles Bovary again and again. So this is also tragicomedy. Language is not forming. Language is not making any sense. Either it is the meta language, the socially agreed upon language, or the individual's way of being is, it is so encumbrous, it is bogged down, it is encumbered by a lot of awkwardness. This boy, and we see the how drawing on the realist tradition, Flaubert very successfully gives us at the outset a very detailed picture of Charles's mediocrity, his awkwardness, his uncouth bearing, right? Where he cannot become like the others around him. He faces a communication challenge. He doesn't know how to carry himself, right? Like other boys, he's not a composed and a self-assured boy, anything but that. And through all minute details, this is like Flaubert is drawing word pictures, vivid word picture. This is completely, drawing on and playing a very successful realist writer, drawing on the realist tradition. So the notion that the written word falls short of expressing even a small portion of the complexity of human life is explored in this novel. Language cannot explain or explore anything which is as complex as the human mind. Language is not even, language cannot carry that layeredness, right? So Charles Bovary, who has his own baggage, who has his own background, is hardly represented in the way the name comes out as a staccato, Charles Bovary, and he becomes Charles Bovary for the rest of the class. He becomes something through misplaced understanding, through miscommunication, right? So we see that to demonstrate how language is frequently an insufficient vehicle for communicating feelings and human ideas, Flaubert is deploying a variety of tactics. So the modern genre such as novel is possible only through understanding this rupture between the word and meaning, reality and fantasy, expectation and annulment of expectation, right? So language fails to grasp the truth, even fails to grasp half of fraction of the human psyche, the emotions, and even the unpredictability and the fallacies of human life, right? The characters' frequent failure to speak with one another serves as a symbol for the fact that words rarely fully words can rarely completely capture the meanings they imply. So, for example, Charles's teacher in the first chapter believes that he calls himself Charles Bovary, and so does the rest of the class. And we see the cruelty of the collective, a group of young boys who can be very, very cruel and make this boy feel further bogged down. And the utterance is from Charles Bovary, it becomes mute. He is completely cocooned and unsure of himself further. So the irreconcilable gap between signifier and signified facilitates the world of illusion. So because communication does not aid human feelings. We see the characters recourse to the world of illusion, to the world of dreams and poesy. There are usage of Latin, which is once again ridiculous. It is ludicrous because none of the characters can comprehend Latin. So it is the remnants of an earlier generation, an old language which is lingering in the present, which cannot be comprehended, but it has become part of the vestiges of earlier tradition. It is used in an unthinking manner. It is used because the tradition supports its usage, not because it aids comprehension, right? So language which does not facilitate communication but does otherwise. Latin blocks communication in a French society, and still it is used. Absurdity, once again, right? It has only seeing and hearing effect. That is the only impact of Latin to French ears. So there is no meaning constituted. Even in Emma's epitaph, in the end, we see the words are in Latin. So I would try to read it: Amabilim conjugem calcus, which means you are treading on a beloved wife. This is something that Charles puts on her epitaph, which is neither sentimental nor funny, but it is certainly grotesque because it is far from, it is besides reality. It does not, the epitaph does not truly represent Emma and Charles's relationship. It is a cliche that timelessly husbands would put on their wife's epitaph, and yet in a very tragic way, in a very moving way, this is also something that Charles Bovary believes in. So it is not really, like I said, a sign of sentimentality, but it is also a token of Charles's sincerity towards Emma in his own limited way, in his own insular, insulated world where he used to live. Till the end, he had no clue about Emma's, misadventures, about her extramarital affairs. He thought she is a loving wife, and that's how it is. It depicts Emma through Charles's perception about her, which is so different from the reality, and that's where the grotesque emerges. So Charles Bovary fails to make his name understood. This inadequacy of speech is something that Emma also encounters time and again, as she is trying to make her distress known to the character of the priest, as well as and also trying to express her love for Rodolphe. And this failure of language, this gap of communication, is also present when Charles reads Rodolphe's letter. By accident, it's a letter for Emma that Charles reads, but he then misinterprets it as a note of platonic affection. He doesn't see anything wrong in it. So between word and construing of meaning, there is this incommensurable gap. The entire narrative is about this breach of language, which includes also which goes on to, which can be extended. The breach between language, word and meaning can be extended to the breach of marital contract that we see between Charles and Emma. The words, the vows that one takes in marriage are never kept throughout. So the lies that Madame Bovary's life is full of contribute to the sense of language's inadequacy in the novel, and to the notion that words may be more effective for the purposes of obscuring rather than representing or conveying the truth. So words, rather than telling us about the truth, in contrast, can obscure the truth. Emma's life is described as a tissue of lies, layers of lies, right? Words function as simulacra with no real reference. It depends on who interprets it and how. Emma invents story after story to prevent her husband from discovering about her affairs. And similarly, we see Rodolphe's relation with Emma is full of lies. He tells her so many lies that he in turn assumes that her words are also insincere. So people are living in their own fantasy in terms of the values that they own project and they own represent, because Rodolphe is made up of lies. His feelings for Emma are full of lies. He thinks that Emma is like him as well. So we see that two people in a relationship are so displaced from each other. The words are playing the game between two people, and they confabulate. They imagine that they fancy that they are in a relationship which is not even there. So Flaubert points out that by lying, the lovers make it impossible for words to even touch the truth in things. They are quite remote to the truth. The strong sense of the inadequacy of language is in part a reaction against the school of realism and its loyalty for things real, the verisimilitude between the real world and how the world is transcribed into words. So this kind of smooth transition from word to word is also something that Flaubert is not very easy, is not very happy with. He doesn't feel very easy about, although he himself greatly draws on the realist tradition. At times he is also looking at the limits, the drawbacks, not the drawbacks, the limits basically of such a tradition which tries to capture everything, which vouches to capture everything from the outer reality. Although Flaubert was in some senses a realist, he also believed that it was wrong to claim that realism provided a more accurate picture of life than romanticism. So Flaubert and his writer's persona, the writer's persona of Flaubert is influenced by too many things, and he doesn't sit very well and very permanently with any of the traditions. It would be great, like I have already stated before, to say that he is a figure that emerges at the crossroads, at the intersections of all these different traditions. And so he is full of different influences coming from different directions. He takes them bits and pieces, but not the whole of it, right? So his work acts as a critic to the realist tradition by fusing dream with reality. Many a times we will discuss more how Emma is recourse to dreams. She even as a maiden, even before her marriage, her life of of reverie, of daydreaming had begun. She was always a very wistful kind of a woman, right? So Flaubert's work acts as a critique against the realist tradition, and in a way it breaks free of the inescapable grids of the real and the very limited, very shrunken and kind of very constricted material existence, which is offered by a parochial life, the life of a small town, something that cannot contain perhaps an unconventional woman such as Emma Bovary. With this, I am going to conclude today's lecture, and we will meet again in our next lecture. Thank you.